Preview.
I begin this video by submitting the question, are we now currently living in the last days as described in the Holy Bible? Unfortunately, the vast majority of the people living in this sinful world don't believe in the precept of the last days. That majority will immediately answer the question with an adamant, no. There are others that might ask, where are the supernatural heavenly signs, or where are the global cataclysms that are supposed to occur? Some will even present the argument that the current generation has not even experienced a world war. Look around at the world. We have nuclear proliferation, arms races, international terrorism, mass beheadings, sexual enslavement, anti-Semitism, racial division, heretofore unknown disease outbreaks, economic implosion, moral decay, catastrophic storms, earthquakes, and tsunamis. With that being said, I intend to take a look in this video at what the Bible says about those events. Collectively, people in the Western world, through no fault of their own, might have forgotten about the unimaginable carnage of disasters like the Indonesian tsunami in 2004, but the Indonesians haven't forgotten.
It started with an undersea earthquake, one of the biggest in recorded history. That triggered a tsunami, which by the time it came ashore here in the Indonesian province of Aceh was a wave maybe 20, maybe 30 meters high. It hit the shore at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and it kept on going. It pushed miles inland, heading towards the regional capital, Banda Aceh. It smashed into the first houses and kept going. By the time it had finished, maybe 160,000 people were dead or dying. The entire city had more or less been destroyed.
The survivors of China's Sichuan province haven't forgotten about the breathtaking loss of life caused by the massive earthquake of 2008.
At the Dongqi High School, Monday afternoon's Chinese literature lesson is still on the blackboard. Here, 2 umbrellas are left on the rack. But the school itself has gone. 4 floors of classrooms collapsed in the earthquake. Hundreds of children who'd just begun their afternoon studies are now trapped in this rubble. As soon as I found out what happened, I rushed here, says this mother. She's looking for her 17-year-old son, Nong Fei. I've been here for 4 days, she says. But it's hard to be hopeful. Here, rescuers bring out a child's body.
The people of Haiti still live with the scars of the 2010 earthquake that killed between 100,000 and 300,000 of their fellow countrymen.
We are getting a glimpse of the absolute worst of it in Haiti. Images taken Friday by the Associated Press show bodies filling a street in the capital, Port-au-Prince. There are fears that as many as 45,000 to 50,000 people were killed by the 7.0 earthquake that struck on Tuesday, and these images seem to give credence to those estimates. It is not clear how many dead are here or if they'll ever be identified. We also got images of a mass grave the government has been filling outside of it.
The people of Japan won't soon forget about the mega earthquake and killer tsunami that smashed the coast of Tohoku in 2011.
もう船も越えるかもしれません。あ、車が堤防を越えました今。船も堤防を越えるかもしれない。
few weeks before the Tohoku disaster, a devastating earthquake literally flattened the city of Christchurch, New Zealand.
Are there people in there? Do people need help?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Should we?
Keep going, keep going. Come on, there's people that are... We don't need to be in this. Come on, we're looking after ourselves.
Yeah,
Hey, sweetie, come on, we've got to think about ourselves.
We just came down.
Come on.
Many people in America, out of sheer ignorance, believe that they are immune to such widespread suffering. But look no further than the widespread flooding that followed Hurricane Katrina in 2005 to dispute that belief. Katrina buried the city of New Orleans and ended up causing the deaths of more than 1,800 people. These are just a few of the natural disasters that have rocked the world in recent years, not including any of the very recent disasters. Now try to get your mind around the many man-made disasters that you can stack on top of these natural disasters. Recall that in 2014 ISIS raised its flag over large swathes of Syria and Iraq and then announced itself as a caliphate. Also in 2014, Russia annexed Crimea and then thumbed its nose at the West and dared them to do anything about it.
The moment Russian troops smashed their way into Ukraine's Crimea airbase. Backed by armoured vehicles, gunfire and stun grenades, special forces supported by pro-Russian militia stormed the Belbek compound near Sevastopol on Saturday. One Ukrainian serviceman was reportedly injured in the seizure, while the base's commander was also detained for talks.
You had pro-Russian separatists shoot down a passenger airliner over the Ukraine and the world just literally stood by and did absolutely nothing about it.
Events marking the first anniversary of the MH17 tragedy began with a church service. Afterwards, the congregation marched to the site where the Boeing came down. These events were organised by pro-Russian separatists who control this area of eastern Ukraine. There is much evidence that they shot down the flight with a missile supplied by Moscow.
Right here in America, our own government decided to open diplomatic relations with communist Cuba.
Cuba and the United States began normalizing relations in December 2014. In July 2015, the two countries agreed an historic deal to re-establish full diplomatic relations severed in 1961. The process took a leap forward in May 2015 when the US took Cuba off its list of state sponsors of terrorism. It was accompanied by the easing of travel, trade and communications restrictions between the two countries.
In the United Kingdom, Scotland nearly voted to dismember Great Britain from the inside out. All of this occurred in 2014.
The UK Supreme Court has denied Scotland the ability to hold an independence referendum. This judgment has set back the Scottish government's campaign to break away from the United Kingdom and become an independent country. The top court ruled that Scottish Parliament cannot legislate a vote for Scottish freedom without consent from the British government.
Staying in the recent past, in 2015, Americans, Britons, Japanese, Jordanians, Egyptians, Iraqis, Jews and Christians alike, were gunned down, beheaded and burned alive by ISIS terrorists. The barbarians, calling themselves the Islamic State, in 2015 alone controlled a territory larger than Great Britain. After the gruesome attacks on Jews in Paris and Copenhagen, Israel's Prime Minister urged all Jews to flee Europe. He wasn't urging them to flee Yemen or Libya, but Europe. That, folks, is a telling sign that the last days are upon us.
ISIS released a new video today claiming to show the mass execution of Ethiopian Christians in Libya. Alex Ortiz in Cairo has more on the terror group's growing influence in North Africa.
The latest ISIS video delivered a clear and direct threat to Christians in the Middle East.
You will not have safety, even in your dreams, until you embrace Islam.
Then militants carried out what appears to be a mass execution. Masked men lined up two groups of Ethiopian Christians, shooting some captives and beheading others.
We're in shock, because in France everyone's crying out Charlie, but few remember that there's a Jewish story which isn't very funny and that just happened, and that's being obscured.
On l'occulte un peu.
Ils sont choqués, ils sont outrés.
French Jews here are shocked and scandalised and are saying they did well to have left before. We didn't all leave for the same reasons, but it's a shame because France is still our country in our heart.
Many have forgotten that on August 6, 2018, Russia invaded Georgia, a country of less than 4 million people in the South Caucasus. The causes of the conflict between the two countries, particularly long-running disputes between Georgia and its breakaway regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, are complex, but the fact remains that on August 7, 2008, Russia launched a full-scale land, air and sea attack against its tiny neighbor, across an internationally recognized border. The conflict pitted 70,000 Russian troops against Georgia's army of about 10,000 soldiers and another 10,000 reservists. Needless to say, the war did not last long. It was over by August 12.
Georgia is in full regime of self-defense against unfounded and totally legitimate aggression from the Russian Federation.
On January 13, 2021, Israeli airstrikes on East Syria killed 57 regime forces and allied Iran-backed fighters in the deadliest such strike since the start of the conflict, a war monitoring group said on Wednesday. Israel's conflict with Syria has only intensified over the past 2 years.
Israel allegedly struck the Syrian coastal city of Tartus on Sunday night. The targets, according to reports, they were Iranian sites in Syria, an air defense system and a radar station. And it's emerged that all these reportedly situated near Russia's main naval base in the area. Our correspondent Jody Cohen has sent us this report. Let's listen in.
According to the Syrian state-run broadcaster Sana, Israeli jets launched missiles from over Lebanon that were aimed for Tartus. They said the missiles killed 3 soldiers and wounded 3 others. Photos on social media apparently showed a fire in the area.
In August of 2021, the United States packed up and left Afghanistan, marking the end of a war that cost tens of thousands of lives and trillions of dollars over the span of 20 years. In the wake of U.S. forces departing, the Taliban seized control of the country and the Afghan government collapsed, sparking panic in Kabul and a rush to evacuate U.S. embassy personnel, foreigners and Afghan allies. On the 24th of February, 2022, Russia invaded and occupied parts of Ukraine in a major escalation of the Russo-Ukrainian War, which began in 2014. The invasion has caused tens of thousands of deaths on both sides and instigated Europe's largest refugee crisis since World War II. About 8 million Ukrainians were displaced within their country by June, and more than 8 million had fled the country by February 2023.
Russia is still attacking the east of Ukraine.
On March 2, 2023, a news story broke regarding the escalating tensions between Iran and Israel, divulging that the two countries are on the verge of war. While many experts disagree on the probability of military conflict between the Jewish state and the Islamic Republic, they do agree that the present moment is rife with potential pitfalls. Iran has reached the capability to manufacture a nuclear weapon, and according to a top Pentagon official, could be within 12 days of enriching sufficient uranium for a nuclear weapon. In response to this development, Israel is preparing for military intervention to stop what it and many Western nations believe could be a disastrous development that should be prevented at all costs. Obviously, there is a pattern that is becoming apparent here. Over the past decade, several prophetic trends have continued unabated. The spread of terrorism, the rise of radical Islam and its number one sponsor, Iran. We have the return of Germany as a world power. The political coercion by the Catholic Church, along with the moral, economic, and political weakening of Great Britain and the United States. These are all specific, prophetic trends you can read about in the Bible. Truthfully, there is really nothing to debate here, it's just a timeline of facts. But the question still is, are these normal times in which we are now living, or are we living in what the Bible calls the last days? The Bible is, without question, a fascinating book, and its writings have lasted for millennia. The entire Western world is linked to it on some level or another. This holy book has changed lives, and it has shaped history. It's the most unusual book that there is. To have been compiled over centuries, by different authors, in different circumstances, and to still have a unified message throughout is extraordinary. It is the most influential book among many different nations that aren't even Hebrew. Even some so-called non-religious people must admit that the fundamental foundations of our Western society are built on the Bible and the revolutionary teachings of Jesus Christ. Some examples are the supremacy of law, the judicial system, morality, virtues, and the elemental role of family. It's all tied to the Bible and to Jesus. And this man, God's Son, talked about the end of days. Not some far-out wackadoodle, not some wild-eyed prophet that nobody took seriously, but Jesus Christ himself described what the world will be like right before he returns. I ask you this, does his description of the world match up with the days in which we now live? Jesus said in Luke 21:28.
But when these things begin to take place, straighten up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near.
Yes, Jesus said that he will return, and he said that he will do it at a definite time. When these things begin to take place, Jesus is the supreme sacrifice and Savior. That fact is universally accepted within the world of traditional Christianity. But too many Christians don't actually read and understand what he said. Those that take the time to closely read through any of the Gospels will immediately realize that Jesus was also a prophet. What he spoke about in Luke 21, and several other passages in the Gospels, are actually prophesied events that are now happening for the first time in history. In looking at the world today, is it any wonder that so many serious-minded leaders and scientists are saying grave things about the dangerous drift in world conditions? In recent years, even many liberal journalists have evoked the terms last days and end times, and even Armageddon, to emphasize how dire global conditions really are. All of these terms and phrases come from the Bible, and each of them describes the modern global catastrophes occurring all over the world. And yet, precious few in this world will bother to look into God's inspired word for answers to the problems we can see multiplying all around us. In 2 Timothy 3, 1-4, the Apostle Paul warned,
But realize this, that in the last days difficult times will come. For men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, revilers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self-control, brutal, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God.
Isn't that passage a striking paradox? Right now the world is facing a mountain of global catastrophes, rampant violence, disease, and suffering, yet mankind is, at the same time, madly in love with self, and addicted to pleasure. Jesus said the same thing in Luke 17:26. He said the last days will mirror those of Noah's day, just before the great flood.
And just as it happened in the days of Noah, so will it also be in the days of the Son of Man. Luke 17:26.
Wickedness was rampant in those days, the same as it is today. Every imagination of the thoughts of men were on evil continually, and the earth was full of violence. And yet,
They were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, they were being given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Luke 17:27.
obviously it was a wretched and miserable world, and yet people were living it up, partying hard and oblivious to the existential threat about to destroy their civilization. There is no doubt in my mind that all Bible prophecy is spot on. It accurately describes our present-day world as being drenched in sin, filled with indiscriminate violence, sexual perversion, and unimaginable crimes. But because of the world's maddening addiction to selfishness and pleasure-seeking, most people have no clue that they are in grave danger of ending up in the lake of fire, as described in the Holy Scriptures. In 2 Timothy 3:7 Paul says,
Always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth.
The more man gains in materialistic knowledge, the further he drifts from God and His truth, and the more dangerously violent the world becomes.
But evil men and impostors will proceed from bad to worse, deceiving, and being deceived. 2 Timothy 3:13.
The entire world is being deceived. As long as Satan and his evil influence remain, the curses of crimes, violence, terrorism, and war will multiply. Despite man's best efforts to curb lawlessness, violence, evil, and the men that promote it, all of these ills will only increase and worsen until God supernaturally intervenes to stop the madness. Matthew 24:3 says,
And as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, Tell us, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign of your coming, and of the end of the age?
As plain as the nose on your face, the disciples asked about the sign of Christ's return, and of the end of the age of man's rule over man, as influenced by the god of this world.
In whose case the god of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving so that they will not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. 2 Corinthians 4:4.
In Christ's day, it was simply understood that some generation would experience the end of the world. It's important to take note that Jesus did not correct his disciples for getting caught up in all that prophecy stuff. Many people just say, don't worry about prophecy, or nations, or wars, or signs, just give your heart to the Lord, live what you believe is a good life, and leave it at that. That is not how Jesus answered his disciples though. Instead, he directly confirmed that there will be an end of this present evil world. He gave specific details that we need to watch for so that we can know when that end is upon us. So if those details, spoken by Jesus himself, happened during our generation, thousands of years after Christ described them. Shouldn't we be jolted by that? What all this means is that, with the Bible, you actually have a better, more accurate news source than any news broadcast, or even the sees all, knows all internet. And if these details are happening right now, during our generation, couldn't that mean we are living at the beginning of the end of the age? The first, and most important warning that Christ gave his disciples.
And Jesus answered and said to them, See to it that no one misleads you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will mislead many. Matthew 24, 4-5.
The book of Revelation speaks of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. In Matthew 24, 4-5, Jesus was describing the first of those 4 horsemen. With that statement he was saying that people are going to be deceived about Christ and his message, and about what true Christianity really is. It will get so bad that Christ's own disciples will be deceived. Many Christians will also be deceived.
This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come. Matthew 24:14. If I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. John 14:3.
This message from Christ must be preached and brought to the world so that as many people as possible can be made aware of the future coming King, world ruler, and administrator of God's family government on earth. The Bible tells us that just before the second coming Jesus said,
For then there will be a great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. Unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Matthew 24:21-22.
I emphasize here again that these are Christ's own words warning us that without God's miraculous and powerful intervention, mankind will not survive. As I stated before, these words were not uttered by some wild-eyed fanatic, but are a warning that came from Jesus himself. Some may ask, why now? I will answer that question this way. Because it has only been in the last 2 or so generations that mankind has acquired the weapons capable of destroying all human life on earth. Now that we have that capability, many times over, shouldn't that fact alone date the fulfillment of Christ's prophecy? He said that if not for God's timely intervention, all human civilization will perish from the earth. Based on Jesus' prophecy, and current events occurring in the world today, we are now quite possibly facing that scenario right in the face. During the Great Tribulation, many people will finally begin to swallow the bitter pill of realizing that they have turned away from God. The truth will finally begin to sink in.
But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Matthew 24:29.
These are the heavenly signs that Jesus warned us will occur. This verse is also the 6th seal of Revelation being broken as recorded in Revelation 6:12-14. These supernatural signs are to be followed by the day of the Lord as described in Joel 2:31.
And I looked when he broke the 6th seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became as black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth, as a fig tree drops its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. The sky was split apart like a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Revelation 6:12-14. The sun will be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. Joel 2:31.
And after that,
And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. Matthew 24:30.
my prayer, and my hope is that people will see, and then recognize the signs, and know that they quite possibly are actually living in the last days that Jesus prophesied about. After they realize, and they recognize, they should know that our Savior's return to earth in power and great glory is now just somewhere slightly ahead of us. And in closing, Jesus Christ is returning soon to the earth in the same manner as he left almost 2,000 years ago, Acts 1:11.
And they said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into the sky? This Jesus, who has been taken up from you into heaven, will come in the same way as you have watched him go into heaven. Acts 1:11.
This time though, he is not coming as a lamb sacrifice for the sins of mankind. He is coming to rule as the resurrected and glorified Son of God. He is coming to forcibly put an end to human suffering and lawlessness, and to set up the peaceful and happy kingdom of God on earth.